Hello everyone, and welcome to my Beyond the Gates official channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Beyond the Gates, a series that arrived on the cultural landscape already charged with the atmospheric weight of secrets that feel older than the towns in which they occur, mysteries that seep out of the soil, and characters whose emotional arcs are drawn as sharply as the shadows that cross the screen in every episode. In looking closely at the episode in which Bill discovers that Hayley's water has been poisoned, and the haunting moment in which he utters exactly 6 words, it becomes clear not only how the show uses shock to propel its narrative, but also how it participates in a long lineage of American television that blends genre, paranoia, and personal trauma into something that feels both unervingly intimate and mythic in scope, because Beyond the Gates is not simply about sinister happenings, but about how people react when their foundational assumptions about safety, trust, and survival begin to crumble, and in that sense it reflects the same storytelling DNA found in Landmark series such as Twin Peaks, The X-Files, Lost, and later prestige dramas that tackle the tension between small-town familiarity and cosmic-level uncertainty. Yet, unlike its predecessors, Beyond the Gates wraps these tropes in a distinctly contemporary sensibility, where every character carries the digital and emotional residue of the modern world, where surveillance is ambient, where communication is fragmented, and where the smallest betrayal can echo louder than the grandest conspiracy, leading to an atmosphere where viewers feel as though they too are picking through a maze of half-truths, decoding gestures, and anticipating twists that have been meticulously seeded across episodes, each scene calibrated to reveal just enough to raise the stakes, but never enough to offer true resolution, which is precisely why the poison water reveal lands with such devastating force. It takes a show built on implication and makes the threat explicitly bodily, explicitly mortal, and explicitly personal, and that shift is crucial because Hayley is not just another character on the roster, but one of the emotional anchors of the series, a young woman whose uncanny ability to perceive patterns in the town's bizarre occurrences makes her both indispensable and vulnerable, and the show has repeatedly emphasized her intuitive insight, her almost preternatural sensitivity to environmental anomalies, and her deep emotional connection to Bill, whose stoic exterior masks a man who has been quietly unraveling since the pilot episode, burdened by a past the audience only learns through fractured flashbacks, hinting at mistakes he cannot forgive himself for, and the moment he finds her water, clouded, metallic smelling, the surface trembling with an almost imperceptible oily sheen, is the moment his inner fractures burst outward, because up until that point he has remained the group's most controlled presence, the one who compartmentalizes fear, who reigns in panic, who manages to clamp down on his own dread in order to maintain stability for everyone else, especially Hayley, whose trust in him has always been depicted as one of the most quietly profound relationships in the show, not romantic necessarily, but threaded with fierce loyalty and shared trauma, and when he lifts the bottle to his nose and realizes the truth, the camera closing in on his eyes as they widen with revulsion and terror, the musical score dissolving into a low, trembling hum. The audience feels not only the narrative shock but the emotional rupture, because the poisoning is not just an attack. It is a declaration of intent from the unseen antagonistic force that has been stalking the edges of the story since the beginning, and Bill's 6 words, spoken in a voice that sounds scraped raw with disbelief, "Someone wanted her gone for good," crystallize the moment into something unforgettable, because those 6 words do more than identify the threat. They redefine the series' direction, shifting it from a story about inexplicable phenomena to a story about targeted malice, about calculated violence, about an enemy willing to cross the ultimate line, and this is why the scene resonates so strongly within the broader context of American television's evolving narrative priorities, as modern series increasingly embrace morally complex protagonists, long-form arcs, and emotional realism even within supernatural or conspiracy-laden plots, and Beyond the Gates exemplifies This trend, by grounding its mystery in character psychology rather than relying solely on spectacle, inviting viewers to experience fear not just as a reaction to external threats, but as an echo of the character's inner turmoil, which becomes especially apparent as the aftermath of Bill's discovery ripples through the remainder of the season, shaping storylines that reveal the systemic corruption infecting the town, the twisted motivations of adversaries who remain hidden behind layers of symbolic imagery, and the subtle dismantling of Bill's emotional armor as he becomes increasingly determined, almost recklessly so, to protect Hayley and expose whoever orchestrated the poisoning, and the show's writers use his unraveling to explore themes that have defined American television for decades: the fragile promise of community, the illusion of order, the weight of personal guilt, the difficulty of discerning truth when institutions fail, and the desperate human need to maintain connection even as danger closes in. And through this lens, Bill's 6 words echo the broader tradition of iconic television moments where a single line becomes the axis around which entire storylines rotate, similar to how Don Draper's confessions reshape Mad Men, or how Walter White's declarations recalibrate Breaking Bad, or how key lines in Friday Night Lights, The West Wing, or The Walking Dead cement emotional turning points that redefine the stakes, because in each case, it is not merely what is said, but what the line represents in the emotional and narrative architecture of the series. And in the case of Beyond the Gates, Bill's quiet, horrified remark stands as a signal that the show has crossed into a new tier of intensity, where survival is no longer a theoretical risk but an immediate, visceral concern, and where the characters' bonds are tested under conditions that reveal their deepest fears, strengths, and vulnerabilities. Furthermore, the poison water scene becomes a pivot point for the audience, who by this stage have been primed through earlier episodes to suspect that the antagonistic force is intelligent, patient, and disturbingly familiar with the group's weaknesses and the specificity of the attack, targeting Hayley, targeting something as mundane as her water bottle, demonstrates a level of proximity and observation that heightens the psychological stakes, making viewers question every background detail, every lingering shot, every piece of set design, because the series excels at embedding clues in the periphery, rewarding careful attention in the grand tradition of American mystery dramas that encourage fan theorizing, online speculation, and collaborative decoding, a phenomenon that has grown dramatically in the era of social media, streaming platforms, and binge-watching culture, all of which enhance the communal experience of unraveling a narrative as layered as Beyond the Gates. And this community aspect is itself a hallmark of American television, whose history has long been intertwined with collective viewing practices, from early broadcast sitcom nights to modern fan-led digital spaces. And the show leverages this cultural backdrop by crafting episodes that feel like puzzle pieces viewers must assemble together, with Bill's 6-word utterance functioning as one of the most important clues yet, not because it supplies information the audience could not guess, but because it dramatically confirms what the series has only implied: that the enemy is personal, that the danger is escalating, and that the emotional costs will be severe. And while the poison water scene stands out as one of the most shocking moments in the show, it also exemplifies the way Beyond the Gates blends genre conventions: horror, psychological thriller, conspiracy drama, supernatural mystery, into something uniquely its own, demonstrating how American television continues to evolve by merging traditional storytelling frameworks with character-centric emotional weight, stylistic experimentation, and long-form world-building, resulting in a narrative where every moment, every object, every line of dialogue feels charged with significance. And the impact of Bill's 6 words reverberates not just within the plot, but within the thematic fabric of the series, which interrogates how people respond when confronted with the realization that safety is an illusion, trust is conditional, and the boundaries between the familiar and the monstrous are far thinner than anyone wants to admit, echoing the anxieties of contemporary culture in which viewers recognize their own fears reflected in the fictional crises unfolding on screen, making Beyond the Gates not merely an entertaining mystery, but a reflection of modern life's uncertainties, where danger can hide in plain sight, and where a single moment of recognition, a poisoned bottle, a whispered line, a realization of betrayal, can alter everything. And yet the moment of Bill's six-word realization, someone wanted her gone for good, continues to evolve in meaning as the series pushes forward, because the more the narrative expands, the more those 6 words mutate from a stunned observation into a prophetic warning, embedding themselves into the DNA of every subsequent episode, every new reveal, and every emotional fracture within the group, illustrating how Beyond the Gates, like many high-caliber American television dramas, understands the narrative power of repetition and resonance, using specific moments as thematic seeds that blossom into larger story arcs, and as these arcs spiral outward, viewers begin to see how the poisoning was not merely an isolated attack on Hayley, but a calculated strike designed to destabilize the entire ensemble psychologically, to unsettle the fragile trust they had only just begun to rebuild after the catastrophic events of the mid-season finale, because trust, and the destruction of it, remains at the heart of the series, and the poisoning demonstrates that their unseen adversary has anticipated their movements, studied their habits, understood their vulnerabilities, and exploited them with clinical precision, which not only escalates the danger but reframes earlier episodes that once seemed unrelated, suggesting that background objects, offhand remarks, and seemingly benign characters may have been part of a larger tapestry of surveillance and manipulation from the beginning, a realization that mirrors a recurring motif in American prestige television, the gradual revelation that the narrative's true antagonist has been present all along, hiding in plain sight, subtly shaping the environment to steer the protagonists into deeper confusion. A narrative technique famously employed by shows like Mr. Robot, Westworld, and Severance, but in Beyond the Gates, the effect is more grounded and more emotionally raw, because the show refuses to rely solely on mechanical twists or puzzle box structure, instead using emotional stakes to elevate each mystery until the audience cares less about the mechanics of the conspiracy and more about its consequences for the characters who feel increasingly trapped in a world that has begun to turn against them. And nowhere is this more evident than in the episodes following the poisoning, when Hayley, recovering, shaken, more determined than ever, begins to question everyone around her with a sharpness that borders on paranoia, not because she doubts her friend's loyalty, but because she understands better than most what it means to be targeted, having endured a lifetime of feeling peripheral, overlooked, and dismissed, and now recognizing that her perceptiveness may be precisely why she was singled out, a burden that adds layers of psychological complexity to her scenes, as she grapples with the terrifying knowledge that someone out there saw her as a threat significant enough to eliminate, and this inner turmoil fuels one of the season's most compelling thematic threads, the exploration of how trauma reshapes perception, creating a heightened awareness that is both a survival tool and a source of unbearable anxiety, and the show handles this duality with remarkable nuance, portraying Hayley not as a victim, but as someone forced to confront the limits of her trust, the fragility of her safety, and the weight of carrying knowledge that others may not be ready to face. And Bill, meanwhile, becomes increasingly obsessed with uncovering the identity of whoever contaminated her water, a fixation portrayed with a slow burn intensity that marks his emotional descent, because while Bill has always been defined by restraint, his silence, his stoicism, his tendency to swallow grief before it can surface, the poisoning shatters that equilibrium, pushing him into a more volatile emotional register that the show uses to explore masculine vulnerability in a way that many American dramas historically shied away from, but modern series increasingly embrace, presenting men not as immutable fortresses but as fragile, wounded beings whose breaking points reveal truths the plot itself might not, and Bill's unraveling becomes a mirror for the audience's own mounting dread, because as he grows more desperate, the boundaries between rational investigation and emotional fixation begin to blur, leading to scenes where his determination feels both heroic and deeply concerning, and the writing wisely leans into that ambiguity, using his spiraling as a commentary on how fear, especially the fear of losing someone, can warp judgment, distort priorities, and make even the most disciplined person susceptible to catastrophic mistakes, and the show emphasizes this with increasingly tense interactions between Bill and the rest of the group, who begin to worry that his obsession with protecting Hayley might make him blind to other dangers, perhaps even playing into the antagonist's plans, because Beyond the Gates is a series that delights in turning character strengths into vulnerabilities, suggesting that the qualities that once made someone reliable might later place them at risk, a recurring theme that becomes central as the series deepens its exploration of human psychology under pressure. And it is precisely this focus on emotional realism that distinguishes the show within the broader context of American television, which in recent decades has shifted from episodic problem-solving to serialized introspection, weaving complex emotional arcs into genre narratives to create stories that resonate on both visceral and intellectual levels, and the Poison Water storyline becomes a prime example of how a single incident can act as a catalyst for expansive narrative transformation, influencing character decisions, altering relationships, and revealing hidden tensions that had been simmering beneath the surface long before the poisoning occurred. And viewers begin to see how small details from earlier episodes, Hayley's unease around certain town officials, the unexplained disappearance of a local scientist, the recurring symbol carved onto the underside of the old bridge, might not be random coincidences, but part of a larger orchestration designed to control, mislead, or punish those who get too close to the truth. And the haunting implication that someone in the town may be working with or controlled by the show's unseen antagonist creates a pervasive atmosphere of paranoia that reshapes every character interaction, every slow zoom, every lingering silence, making the town itself feel like an accomplice, a living organism observing the characters, breathing with them, waiting for the next opportunity to strike. And this environmental tension aligns with long-standing American television traditions of using setting as character, a technique seen in shows like Stranger Things, True Detective, The Leftovers, and Yellow Jackets, where the environment is not merely a backdrop, but an active participant in the unfolding drama, reflecting the emotional states of the characters and reinforcing the themes of isolation, dread, and the unspoken histories that bind a community to its darkest secrets. And as Beyond the Gates moves deeper into its season, the Poison Water revelation becomes the central node around which all other mysteries revolve, because the more the characters investigate, the more they realize that the attack on Hayley was not only an attempt to eliminate her insight, but also a message, one that Bill, in his desperation, may be interpreting correctly or catastrophically wrong, and the tension surrounding his interpretation becomes one of the narrative's most richly layered sources of conflict, as some characters urge him to step back, think rationally, and avoid making himself a target, while others encourage him to push harder, to uncover the truth no matter the cost, creating fractures that force the group to reevaluate their alliances, their priorities, and their willingness to confront the growing realization that someone in their midst may not be who they claim to be, or worse, may be fully aware of the danger and complicit in maintaining it, a revelation that feels increasingly inevitable as clues accumulate and as the show's signature visual motifs, flickering lights, distorted reflections, symbols hidden in corners of frames, begin to appear with greater frequency, as though the antagonist's presence is becoming bolder, closer, hungrier, and the poisoned water stands as the moment when the story's previously subtle menace reveals its teeth, announcing that the danger is no longer metaphorical but physical, no longer implied but manifest, and that the characters must now confront the terrifying possibility that their unseen enemy has already infiltrated their lives far more deeply than they ever imagined. The implications of Bill's 6 words continue to ripple outward through the narrative of Beyond the Gates. The series leans even further into the unsettling realization that the poisoning was not merely a murder attempt but a carefully